San Jose State has been at the center of the debate over transgender athletes. Last year, some of the women's volleyball players sued the school for allowing a transgender player on the team. In response to today's executive order, San Jose State says it maintains an unwavering commitment to the wellness, safety, and privacy of our students, faculty, and staff, and to fostering a supportive and caring environment for all, end quote. The president's flurry of executive orders is raising new questions about the limits of presidential power and his goals in the White House.
And joining us now to break all of this down is political science Professor Steve Fish with UC Berkeley. Professor, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Dan.
So when you look at now that Trump is in office, he signed about 40 executive orders. Some big ones include rolling back DEI, ending birthright citizenship, and then, of course, as we just mentioned, targeting trans people. When you look at these types of executive orders, of course, the president has executive power, but is this misusing executive orders when you look at these in a grand scheme?
Well, a lot of it is, and some of his orders are just blatantly anti-constitutional. Birthright citizenship is written into the Constitution, so it's unlikely that would survive a court challenge. I think probably the most anti-constitutional thing he's done is getting, I'd say probably the least attention, and that is his attempt to basically take over the power of the purse strings from Congress and to concentrate spending power in himself, in the executive branch. That too is likely to meet court challenge for sure. Some of the matters he's taken up in executive orders, though, like the story we just saw on transgender athletes, is in his constitutional right to do, and it's likely probably to be sustained by the courts. There is a consensus in the United States against people who were born male competing in women's and girls sports after transitioning. But we have to keep in mind that that doesn't mean Americans are anti-trans. A vast majority of Americans also actually support workplace protections, laws for trans people, laws that outlaw discrimination in the workplace against trans people. So this is a complicated issue. But on this particular issue of sports, Trump definitely has the opinion of the vast majority behind him.
You mentioned workplace protections. One of the other things that we're starting to see is talk about potentially stripping OSHA, just completely getting rid of it in some ways. There's also so many federal employees that are being offered buyouts to get out of their jobs to try and, I guess, trim down the fat, as the president has called it before. How concerning is that?
It's very concerning, and it's not just that Trump wants to cut the size of the federal government. Trump doesn't have any big passion for cutting the size of the federal government. What he wants to do is do away with any civil servants who might be devoted to their jobs rather than to him personally. He wants to do with anybody who has a sense of professional commitment that could conflict with Trump's own aims. I don't think he's really going to do much to shrink the size of the federal government. That's the pretext. That's what he says. What he really wants to do is to get away with the inspectors, with the civil servants, who he feels like might not do his bidding if it in fact conflicts with their notion of their job mission and the Constitution.
Professor, you mentioned it earlier that executive orders are not really laws. So I'm curious as to how they differ and what happens if you're a state or a school that's federally funded and you choose not to follow the executive order.
Well, on the transgender athletes, for example, schools can actually allow trans people to compete in the sports of the gender that they selected into. They just threaten, the federal government now threatens them with loss of funds. So what they would be doing is losing federal funds if they in fact get those federal funds, and if they defy the president's policy. And in fact, apparently he does have the right to do this. Now, it could be challenged in courts, of course. The Biden administration's policy was just the opposite. It actually provided for a policy that more or less insisted that trans athletes be able to compete in sports of the gender into which they had selected. So this is a real turnaround in policy.
Political science professor Steve Fish with UC Berkeley, thank you so much for helping us understand all that's been going on in the White House. Thank you.
Talk again soon. Thank you.